Good morning, everyone. David Atkins back with another video. Today I'm going to be talking about organized stalking, and I'm going to be coming out of John Hall's book again. John Hall is a great author. He describes his program to a T. His book's called Guinea Pigs. I'm not promoting his book. I just love it because, man, he explains it to a T. So I figured, I haven't talked about gang stalking in a while. I've been focused on weapons and the psychotronics of this program that's being used. I don't know if it's been, some people only experience stalking from what I've heard. I get it the whole deal. But anyway, and there's already a Bible verse to go with it. So I figured, it says Luke 20:20, keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be honest. Imagine that. All right, here we go. Organized stalking. In January 2008, the U.S. Department of Justice published a survey, Stalking Victimization in the United States. The results were alarming. Complaints of stalking legitimate enough to be included in the study were exponentially from the previous survey done in 1996. An estimated 3.4 million people were victims of stalkers, while another 2.4 victims of harassment. The study covers victimization occurring in 2005, first half of 2006, inquired about events in the previous 12 months. 6% of the 5.8 million total suffered electronic monitoring, suffered spyware, bugging, or video surveillance. While many of the victims were stalked by someone they were acquainted with, 1 in 10 victims were stalked and harassed by people unknown to them. The study defined stalking as a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear. Approximately 130,000 victims reported they were fired or asked to leave their jobs because of stalking. Another study published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine in 2006 found that 7 million women and 2 million men in the United States have been stalked. The study was from the National Center for Injury Prevention and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It also found that individuals who were never married, separated, widowed, or divorced experienced significantly higher rates of stalking than those individuals living with a partner. A 2002 study found no gender differences in the mental health effects of stalking. Both male and female victims experienced equal rates of impaired health, depression, and injury, and were more likely to engage in substance abuse than their non-stalk peers. A common theme among several of the stalking studies was the inability of the victims to get appropriate help from law enforcement officials. Despite anti-stalking laws in just about every state, victims that report stalkers are often disregarded by their local police departments as head cases or suffering from delusion of being stalked. Prosecution rates bear out this fact. Between 85.4% and 93.6% of stalking perpetrators are not prosecuted, and only 56.3% of them are convicted and sentenced to jail. Moreover, the 2008 DOJ study reported that most common police response to stalking complaints was to take a report, while in 20% of the cases, no action was taken at all. About 50% of victims perceived no change in the stalking and harassment after police were contacted. Obviously, we have a growing problem with stalking and harassment in this country based on several governmental studies. However, I propose that the problem may be compounded by lack of appropriate law enforcement engagement at the local level. This may be due to several factors. The reporting officer's perception of the victims as mentally ill for believing they are being stalked, ignorance on the part of local law enforcement as to the extent of the problem, and difficulty in obtaining enough evidence to justify an arrest, knowledge on part of law enforcement officials as to the difficulty in prosecution of stalking cases, unwillingness to dedicate the manpower needed to investigate what they perceive as low-level crime. Armed with some basic statistics in hand, we can now turn our attention to a very specific form of stalking. Many of the victims of auditory harassment also complain of a form of stalking referred to as organized stalking, gang stalking, or cause stalking. I prefer the term organized stalking as it more accurately reflects the true nature of the phenomenon. Organized stalking is the harassment of an individual by the people unknown to them for the sole purpose of inducing psychological trauma. It is perpetuated by individuals from within their community working in concert with each other to achieve a desired goal. It's centrally directed and organized. Gang stalking is a term used for this phenomenon. However, it's misleading in that it evokes a mental picture of thugs in matched jackets perpetuating the crime. This is not the case. Cause stalking, a term coined by author David Lawson in a similarly titled book, implies a racial or social agenda on the part of the perpetrators. Again, this has not been shown to be an accurate term to victim demographics. Surveys conducted by human rights organization Freedom for Covert Harassment and Surveillance have demonstrated a relatively random distribution of victims of this crime. There appears no increased predilection based upon race, religion, profession, or culture. The only two common threads reported among victims are female gender and a high incident of sexual assault, facilitated date rape drugs, or such as roofie or GHB. A large number of male victims have also reported being raped after subreptitiously ingesting rape drugs. No sexual assault goes largely unprosecuted due to the amnestic effects of date rape drugs, as well as the narrow window of opportunity to detect them in the urine of the victim. Organized stalking consists of a complex myriad of actions on the part of the perpetrator, and that has undoubtedly contributed to the rise in complaints reported by the DOJ. The problem has been so pervasive that a multitude of websites have arisen to educate and console growing numbers of victims. Eleanor White has been battling the organized stalking phenomenon longer than anyone. Her website, www.raven1.net, is both educational and current in this context. GangStalkingWorld.com is another excellent website providing educational articles for those who suspect they may be victims of this cowardly crime. Some of the antics associated with organized stalking include following the target individual 24/7 wherever they travel, loitering around their homes or businesses they frequent, breaking into the target's home, usually to vandalize and rummage through their belongings with rare property theft, harassing the victim with profanity and vulgar gestures while in public places, character assassination of the victim through spreading rumors about them to the neighbors or employers, damage to the victim's vehicles or personal property, bombard the victim with loud noises around their home or work. The perpetrators will often enlist the help of the victim's neighbors by convincing them they are some sort of legitimate law enforcement. In several instances, the perpetrators have produced false FBI credentials to convince neighbors they're assisting in a legitimate investigation. Often vacant homes or apartments around the victim will be used as a base from which to terrorize the intended target. The stalking protocols used by the perpetrators not to be confused as actual surveillance. It's simply a harassment tool used in form of psychological warfare. The stalking is intended to induce the psychological stress, alienate the victim, isolate the victim, and maintain them in a perpetual state of helplessness or the victim mentality. The complaint of this type of stalking in law enforcement is often ignored, and the victim is referred to as mental health professional. The psychiatric community, being ill-educated on this topic, invariably diagnoses the victim with schizophrenia or delusional disorder. The eventual discreditation of the victim through the diagnosis of mental disorder is probably the ultimate intended goal of the perpetrator. This type of stalking is not a new phenomenon and gets its roots from an FBI operation called COINTELPRO. Between 1956 and 1971, the FBI directed a number of covert operations known as the COINTELPRO, an acronym for Counterintelligence Program. Their goal was to infiltrate and subvert certain social and political groups that were deemed as a threat to national security. The directives at COINTELPRO were issued by FBI Director Edward J. Hoover and were designed to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, and neutralize the activities of the targeted groups and their leaders. Some of the groups included communist organizations, women's rights groups, black nationalists, civil rights organizations, the NAACP, the American Indian Movement, and the KKK. The methods employed by the FBI are identical to those being used today by organized and stalking groups. They include public character assassination, harassment through legal and financial institutions, conspicuous surveillance, illegal breaking and entering, psychological operations, vandalism, and assault. Harassment is often through the manipulation of employers, parents, neighbors, or landlords to assist in victimization of the intended target. COINTELPRO remained secret until 1971 when the FBI field office was broken into and documents related to COINTELPRO operations were leaked to the press. In 1976, an investigation was launched by the Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence agencies, intelligence activities of the United States Senate. This was chaired by Senator Frank Church and referred to as the Church Committee hearings. The final report of the Church Committee essentially found the FBI guilty of vigilante operations aimed squarely at preventing the exercise of the First Amendment rights of speech and association. Unsavory and victims' tactics have been employed, including anonymous attempts to break up marriages, disrupt meetings, estrange persons from the professions, and provoke target groups into rivalries that might result in death. That's going on these days. They're trying to split us targets up, so they're throwing, they'll throw all kinds of crosses and make us fight with each other. I'll try not to fall for that BS. These tactics are identical to the ones being used by organized stalking groups today. So the question remains, is organized... Oh yeah, I'm going to read that one more time because I think some targets need to hear this. Okay, let me back up. Attempts to break up marriages. I don't know. provoke target groups into rivalries that might result in death. And I'm going to leave it there. That's self-explanatory what I mean by that, why I'm stressing it. So the question remains, is organized stalking a continuation of COINTELPRO or merely a replication of its tactics by criminal groups? My personal belief is that a combination of both hypotheses. Certainly, there are several cases I'm aware of where former intelligence agency employees are being directly harassed by their former employees in a COINTELPRO fashion. However, most victims of organized stalkers are not whistleblowers or former intelligence agent employees that would awaken the ire of the intelligence community. The majority of victims are citizens with no ties to radical groups. However, the identification of one of the stalking groups in Texas leads me to the belief that this phenomenon is a combination of formal COINTELPRO training and replication of tactics by criminals. This is John Hall talking. This is not me. I'm reading out of his book. The organization identified in San Antonio, Texas as hiring out this type of harassment is licensed as a private investigation agency. The agency is owned by a former FBI agent in his 70s who had been in his prime as an FBI agent during COINTELPRO. His employees, however, are not connected to any particular government agency and are simply licensed private investigators. Despite multiple complaints to the Texas Department of Public Safety, the licensing agency for private investigators, this group continues to victimize people in Texas uninhibitedly. Many former FBI agents turned to private investigator work after separating from this agency. It may be the mode of networking among various stalking groups from state to state. When one analyzes the complaints being voiced by the victims of organized stalking from each state, striking similarities are very apparent. All the victims are experiencing stalking, break-ins, appliance tampering, remote neural monitoring. The stalking groups are obvious networking with each other and following a template of proven successful tactics. Networking among these organized stalking groups would also explain the continuation of a victim's suffering even after moving to another state to escape their torment. Man, I've been to since my targeting started, I've been to like 25 states, and everywhere I go, as soon as I get there, it starts. So yeah, he's telling the truth there. Victims who relocate hoping to enter stalking usually report 2 to 3 months of relief before the harassment. No, I couldn't. Before the harassment resumes in their new geographic location. While the idea of multiple COINTELPRO trained agents scattered over the United States seemed far-fetched at first, one need look no further than to a new alarming trend in the intelligence community for a possible answer. We will cover that role in private intelligence contractors' possible play in this later chapter, which is one I did yesterday. I hope y'all like that. I figured I'd cover stalking because I haven't covered nothing. But that was John Hall. I think he could have went a lot deeper to the tactics. But his other stuff I've read is very good. But it's very interesting statistics and stuff. I figured I would throw that out there, and for people who cannot afford the book or find the book online or whatever, I figured I would throw that out there for y'all. So anyway, God bless y'all. Like I said, any special requests y'all have, I will do them. I done the sex kitten programming thing yesterday as a special request. So yeah, any video y'all want me to research, I'd be glad to do it. And I hope everybody's doing all right. God bless y'all. And I'll probably do one tomorrow. If I don't do one tomorrow, I will leave a post in the community. But I'm pretty sure I'll do one tomorrow, and I'll take off Wednesday. Anyway, God bless y'all.